This is Willamette Week's endorsement interview for Multnomah County Chair. We're first going to start by asking you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running. JVP, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Jessica Vega-Peterson, and just to start off, my family and I have lived in East Portland for the past 17 years. We have been in the same house on the same block in a rapidly changing community. East Portlanders were the frontline workers who kept us afloat during COVID. We experienced some of the highest gun violence and traffic fatalities in the city, and we live in a part of the county that has been underinvested and ignored. When I first ran for state representative, I ran on that inequity, and community came together to support me. We fought for sidewalks, we fought for investment, and we got that and so much more for the people of East Portland. I have the experience, the track record of accomplishment, the coalition to lead us forward and lead Multnomah County in the right direction. I bring people together to get big things done. That's why I have the broadest and deepest coalition of people and organizations who are supporting me in this race. They know I am the best person to lead Multnomah County forward. Sharon likes to say that I will be 4 more years of the status quo. I am not and have never been part of the status quo. My record as an elected official is hallmarked by making big changes from the first day I was in office. As Oregon's first Latina representative, I passed the Coal to Clean bill, a first in the nation law to transition off of coal-powered fuel. At the county, I started the practice of bringing business leaders, neighborhood associations, and schools together to successfully site shelters in our neighborhoods. And I led the work on Preschool for All, which has set a national standard for university quality preschool. For the last 6 years, Sharon has literally had a seat at the table to shape our housing and homelessness policy. In that time, we have passed 2 housing bonds and a supportive housing services measure, as well as 6 county budgets, and she has not meaningfully contributed to shaping them. Instead, we've had widely reported dysfunction and discord. She has not earned the right to lead Multnomah County. At this inflection point, when we have to address housing and behavioral health, we have to address climate change, we have to address systemic racism and our community safety. We need a leader who has a proven record and who can collaboratively bring the county, the city, metro, and the state together to address these issues with real solutions. I'm that person, and that's why voters should choose me as their next Multnomah County Chair.
Thank you. Sharon?
Yeah, first I thank you for this opportunity, and I will talk some about myself, but I do want to respond first of all to the comment that about accomplishments. And I would note, yes, the one accomplishment that Commissioner Vega-Peterson can point to at the county is being part of the Preschool for All measure, which is passed, that I hope ends up being a program that is universal and is successful. Right now, to date, I don't think we can say that. So there's not actually an accomplishment. We have spent $105 million for 687 children. If all of them enter preschool this year, this fall, that comes out to $152,000 per child in preschool, which I don't consider success. I consider an embarrassment. So I hope that the program pans out and Commissioner Vega-Peterson will be there for another 2 years regardless of the outcome of this race to address that. In terms of actual accomplishments in the core work of the county, which is health and human services, I have accomplished long before coming to the county, first of all, in the work I've done as an ER doctor. I led at the state to introduce opioid prescribing guidelines before anyone was talking about them, because on the front line we saw in the ER how opioids were devastating our communities, and we saw the gathering tsunami of devastation that would happen from unrestricted opioid prescribing. So I led the charge in the state adopted by every emergency room to address opioid prescribing. I brought an information exchange forward that would identify people frequently using emergency departments so we could identify who they are. They are often the most expensive people in our systems and often the most vulnerable, and we are just seeing them cycle through. And I led an effort to get that information together so we could use our resources to identify them, coordinate their care, get them the services that they need, and then advance that care, saving millions of dollars in the healthcare system at that time. As the medical director for the Oregon Foundation for Reproductive Health, I led in a statewide, getting a statewide tool adopted to help women and girls avoid unintended pregnancies if they wanted, to get pregnancies that were wanted as healthy as possible, and to provide abortion services to women if that's what they wanted. I have used my on-the-ground frontline experience to drive systems change even before coming to the county. The reason I ran for the county was to expand that impact, and I have. And so areas where I've done that are in homelessness, where I partnered with Commissioner Dan Ryan to introduce Bill for Zero, which is a common sense, data-driven, person-driven strategy to combat homelessness. It has been adopted in places, successfully in places throughout the country. It has been ludicrous that our county has not adopted that until Commissioner Ryan and I presented it. In behavioral health, I have worked in collaboration with Mental Health Court Judge Nan Waller, also the city, also public health and safety, to introduce a plan for a stabilization and triage center for people experiencing substance use crises. So that methamphetamine, fentanyl, whatever it is. So it's a place for people to be brought or to go that is not the ER where I would see them, or jail where Judge Waller would see them. I've introduced Fuse, where we put all of this together. It's called the Frequent User Systems Engagement Service. Sort of like that information exchange I mentioned earlier. The same people cycling through our ERs cycle through our jails, cycle through our homeless systems. And if we get a handle on those individuals, we can take care of people who are the most vulnerable in our community and also cost all of our crisis systems the most. That's where we should be using resources. And I have introduced the program at the county, and we are embarking on a pilot now to use our resources toward that. Those are data-driven solutions that actually are being implemented now that are at the core work of the county. And in addition, the one thing that I think is we sort of don't talk about is accountability, overarching accountability. And that's like the biggest issue I think we have to talk about at the county, because we're not accountable for how we spend the massive amounts of taxpayer dollars we spend on community services, on the nonprofits that provide the services in our county. We spend all this money, supportive housing services, all of our money, and you can't follow the money. And we need systems that can. So I got passed in our last budget funding for an outside agent to review our systems of contracting at the county, to do an overhaul so we can make recommendations moving forward. There was a scathing audit 10 years ago saying we are not doing this right. It was re-upped a few years ago, right before I started at the county, saying, Chair, you need to take on this contracting. You're not doing best practices. It was never done. I'm the only one who was called out for accountability and got something done, moving us forward. So that's why I'm running. That's the kind of thing that I will take on as county chair. I have a proven track record of decades, and my action and the work that I do is doing things differently, not the status quo, not business as usual, not the same talking points. It's action, accountability, and proven results in the core work of the county.
I guess we'll start with homelessness. I think it's top of mind for pretty much all voters. You both have shown over the past couple years a pretty different approach to homelessness. Sharon, I know you've been critical of the SHS measure and have advocated for more alternative shelter. And JVP, I know you've been very much in support of SHS. we'll start with you. Can you tell us how your approach to homelessness is different than Sharon's, and if elected county chair, if you would reallocate any homelessness or housing dollars that are currently being allocated, or if you'd sort of stick with the programs that are ongoing right now?
Yeah, I think the supportive housing services measure is giving this opportunity that we have never had to bring incredible resources to bear on our issues of housing and houselessness and behavioral health supports, and so it's absolutely imperative that the county, as the leader of the dollars that are being funneled in for the city of Portland and the other East County cities, does a great job in managing that money and making sure that we are being transparent and accountable and knowledgeable about where all those dollars are going. The supportive housing services measure came about because of looking at other areas where there have been effective long-term solutions to address the crisis of homelessness, including chronic homelessness. And that has to be about getting people into stability and permanent housing where they have the supports to make them. They have the supports to help them be successful in staying in there. That being said, there's about a third of the dollars that are going to permanent housing supports. There's another third that is going to getting people safely off the streets into alternative housing, and there's a third of the money that's going into long-term rental assistance dollars, which is helping prevent the crisis of homelessness. So that makeup is about the right one. What the county absolutely has to do is look at, for the emergency that we have on our street with people who are living outside, unstable, we have to be a better partner to the city. We have to be a better partner to Metro as they're looking at the overarching work in some of the impacts of that people are experiencing as they're living outside, as well as the people who are living housed outside too. And that means being a better partner when it comes to things like trash collection. It has to be a better partner. If the city is going to be moving forward with things like sweeps or saying that there can be no camping on safe routes to school or within a certain range, there has to be a better relationship between the city and the county in partnering about how are we doing outreach to those people who are living outside, what are all the alternative shelters that we're having people go into. We don't need to invest another dollar into expanding our congregate shelter. We have a lot of congregate shelters. That's a good solution for some folks, but for a lot of people, they need a place where they can safely close the door. I think one of the biggest differences between me and Commissioner Myron is that Sharon has this idea that we can do all of these tiny shelters all over the city and we can get that into action very quickly. I disagree. I think the power of the government is best when we can work at our largest capacity, at the highest use of government, by investing in larger solutions that can get on board faster. So some of those are like existing hotels. I've been working with organizations who are looking at purchasing hotels and turning them into first temporary shelters where people have a door that they can close, but then can ultimately be affordable housing solutions. Working with building owners in downtown who are really interested in being part of the solution by taking some of the commercial space that's right to be turned into affordable housing and turning those into.
Would the county potentially offer incentives to those developers?
There's a lot of ways that the county could potentially be working with those. For instance, with the company that's looking at the hotels, they actually have successfully done this without a ton of public dollars down in Southern Oregon for the people who are experiencing wildfires. What they need is help getting partnered with a service provider to actually run the shelter while it's in the shelter space, and they may need assistance with help with some of those longer term rental assistance dollars. And I think those dollars that the supporting housing services measure is providing is actually like a very powerful tool that we have to help people be successful off the street and staying in permanent housing.
And when you say that you think the county needs to be a better partner to the city, can you be more specific about what that would look like? Does that look like dollars contributed to homeless sweeps, or what does that look like to be a better partner other than just?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean more dollars contributed to homeless sweeps, but it means like looking at trash pickup, right? Like that is an area where the county hasn't provided any dollars. That is something where I think we can be a better partner in doing things like that. It is really working closely with the city in as they're talking about where they, you wrote an article about like what's going to be happening at Laurelhurst Park and potentially what's going to happen to all of those people there. Is there a conversation happening with the county where the county can put dollars and resources and staff in to help find better permanent solutions for those people so that they're no longer just being swept from one place to another, but actually getting into a more permanent shelter? That's what it looks like.
Sharon, JVP touched on this a little bit, but I know you've had several proposals that you've kind of added to the budget hearings last minute about more money for alternative shelters. I know those haven't always gone over well with the rest of the commission. Why do you think that is?
So I think it's because the other commissioners are getting information about homelessness and housing services from the current, it was then the Joint Office Director, Mark Jolin, who is very aligned with the chair, who is hired by the chair, and who has a philosophy very aligned with the current chair. That is the power of the role of chair. And so if the information that my fellow commissioners are getting is from someone who is supposedly the expert on this, rather than on the ground or from the people doing the actual work on the front line and seeing those systems, then that is where they will put their stakes. I mean, I would do that if it wasn't something, if I was not an expert in something or had seen frontline, I would probably trust in the person that was supposedly the expert in that.
Can you define for me where your philosophical difference is with Mark Jolin?
And the thing is, and it goes, so people don't understand and they listen to a different point of view. So what is the difference is what Commissioner Vega-Peterson just talked about, which is this sort of false dichotomy, this false conflict between housing first and the public safety humanitarian crisis of unsheltered homelessness. And so those are two separate problems requiring two separate solutions and approaches. And so my approach has been for that public health crisis, the humanitarian crisis, and it is in fact complementary to the housing first approach. It makes things better for people so they're ready for housing when they have it. But I think there's been this just dogmatic cry saying we have to do housing first at all costs. And the thing is, I would be curious how many people Commissioner Vega-Peterson thinks are living outside unsheltered right now, and how we're going to get them housing right now. It just is
So
a question.
one thing I'll say is, I think where these two things really butted heads was in the People for Portland's ballot measure that obviously didn't make it, but that would have rerouted 75% of the SHS dollars to emergency shelter. I don't remember where you stood on that. Were you in support of that?
No.
Were you somewhat in support of it? I feel like I remember in our first endorsement interview, you had sort of shown tentative support for that.
So I have, and I can find you all the communications about it, but I have been very clear in saying that I believe we need to address the humanitarian crisis, public health crisis that's in our bailiwick as the county of people living unsheltered and dying in increasing numbers on our streets. We can do that through sanctioned camping, alternative shelters like the ones I mentioned, which are not my only solution, but are part of an ecosystem, that there are so many approaches and strategies we can use to get people sheltered while waiting. I don't think we need to, we can't set aside a certain percentage and say, oh, we're doing this for shelter, and especially if it's invested in shelter people don't even want in the first place. We need to be taking a holistic approach. So I agree we need to invest more in shelter and making people safer, healthier, saving their lives while they're living outside. And we need to invest in permanent solutions.
What specific, either alternative shelters or congregate shelters, like can you give us specifics, numbers, where that funding would come from, and which formulas?
Well, so that's, I have them right here. I can hand you these. These have been the actual things I proposed to the county. That was most recent. It's on my website. This was a year ago when I made the budget proposal, because my colleague has said that I have not provided specifics to her or others. So those are specifics about one aspect of the ecosystem that can be brought to scale. It is a network of tiny microsites, say, where you do have basic amenities for people, like rustic campsites, basically. You have 10 structures-ish where people can be with places they can close their doors. You have services that are toilet and hygiene services, trash pickup, and then you get when you go to say to people, you get those, if you had one of these tiny minimal impact sites in every neighborhood in Portland, that's 1,000 people.
Isn't this basically what's the nonprofit doing this right now?
We Shine, PDX.
Yeah, aren't they basically doing this?
So this is something I've talked about with We Shine for literally years now, and yes, it is exactly like what they are talking about. They just never got any support from the city or county to do it, and so I have connected and formed a collaborative with all the shelter people and organizations, because all they hit are barriers, because I do the work, because I talk to them, I see that. And there are so many great approaches and demonstration projects now, despite the county not investing in it.
Do you think the
to show
county
it
should have
works.
invested more in the Safe Rest Villages or provided more?
So Safe Rest Village, they're entirely different.
Right, but I guess maybe this is separate, but do you think the county should have supported those more?
I don't think that, I mean, we have, what, one that's up and running now after a year and a half or more? I don't think so. I think that we need the ecosystem. We need to identify multiple options and how to best invest our limited resources to help the most people. And I think Safe Rest Villages can be a component of that ecosystem. That's great. So I am totally anti-sweep. I think it's inhumane, it is unconscionable.
Under all circumstances, you were anti-sweep.
Well, if we do not have places that people want to go, that they can go with choices. So what this adds to our equation here is when you tell people they can't be in a certain place, you say, but here's a menu of option of places you can be. You can be at a rustic campsite and we'll get you there with your people, your pets, your community, and we'll help you there. And then you can just be because when I go out with Portland Street Medicine, I've talked to hundreds of people living outside. We all talk about bringing together some people with lived experience. I meet them one-on-one on the ground every time I go out. And
so, sorry, I'm interrupt here, but a menu of options, I think,
a menu of
great.
options.
It sounds like a
that people
utopia.
want. Yeah.
But this all comes down to money. Where does that money
This
come
is
from?
cheap. Well, the sanctioned campsites and the small places that we can identify where they go is so much cheaper and faster than anything that anyone is proposing. So the idea is we actually, and I've identified in some of that work, because I've done the work on the ground to identify how much they cost, where they can go. I have gotten just closed doors when I've asked for what our county land is where we could put these things. I literally don't get a response because the chair controls that information.
But again, back to budget, where does this money come from? Does it get rerouted from SHS? Where in its coffers does the county have the money to create this menu of options?
It's both. It's supportive housing services money, because a priority in that work was alternative shelter options. So supportive housing services money, we have $250 million per year just in the Joint Office of Homeless Services. It's also public health money. It is money in our health department. We have so many opportunities to use funds creatively, and we just are not implementing those solutions.
Could I ask a question? I would like you both to give us a letter grade for the joint office and explain it in a minute or less. JVP, you go first.
Okay, you guys love letter grades. So I just want to say, first of all,
Yes.
I know.
Definition.
So first of all, I just want to say about this plan, this is like the same plan that Sharon has been talking about for 3 years, and there literally were like simple questions like, how much is this going to cost, and how is finding the land for this going to be any more faster than the trouble that Commissioner Ryan has had in citing like a handful of supportive Safe Rest Villages, and there were like no answers. And in fact,
So I can answer those questions because I did when you asked them, and they're in there.
Okay, let's get to the let's get
So
Yeah.
okay, so for the Joint Office of Homeless Services,
Yeah.
I don't know, like a C+.
Yeah.
And I don't like, but I feel like, you know, and let me just give some, so we have a lot of work to do in the Joint Office of Homeless Services in terms of making sure that the work that is being done is consistent. The information that we're getting about people who are living outside is accurate. I think that the Built for Zero proposal is great. It's not a full solution. It is, like, as somebody who comes from a tech background, it is a great way of getting data and having data that is clear and transparent and shareable, and I am totally in favor of that. But that isn't the system. We also have to make sure that as the joint office and the partnership that we're doing with Washington and Clackamas and Metro with the dollars, that we are having providers who are consistent in how they're approaching people, the information they're getting, and then that we are being clear about that. I also think that if you look at the increase of the joint office in terms of both the number of employees that they have and the dollars that they're working with, like, this is a department that has grown over the last 3 years, the last 6 years, into a place where it has the funding to actually do better with data analysis, accountability, tracking, and sharing information. And we have not, I would say we would get an F for the ability to, like, share information accurately and quickly. But I think the work that is being done is good work in terms of getting dollars out the door to help people with rental assistance, with helping to support some of the newer affordable housing that's been that opening up to getting that, and we are continuing to invest in smaller organizations to the larger organizations of really making sure that we are providing physical and mental health wraparounds for people to be successful. So that's all that goes into there. We're at a C+, but we need to get to A work, and we have to do that as quickly as possible.
Okay, same question for you.
D, the only reason I don't give an F is because there are really good people that are giving their all to do this work, and do happen to do it despite the systems. So one of the first things I would do as chair is initiate an overhaul of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, because it has fallen well short of its promise. It has a great mission, but to collaborate and to be collaborative, data-driven, and effective in reducing houselessness. We see growing houselessness. We see increased numbers of people dying unsheltered on our streets. That, to me, is failure.
What's the overhaul? How would you overhaul it?
I would have an outside party come in to do basically an audit and identify what is the office even doing.
So it's a joint office, which means it works with the city as well. Let me
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
let's go with it.
Wax philosophic,
for a moment.
Yeah.
Who at City Hall would you consider to be the most competent and effective official? I'll ask each of you this, because I can't think of one, but you might be able to.
I can.
I mean, I think the important thing, and part of the reason why it's a C+, is like we have to do a better job of partnering with the city in the running of the joint office and really talking about what that means. So 2 of the things that the new chair is going to have to do that are very, very important to the success of the joint office. One is hire a permanent director. So that is like going to be a huge responsibility that I would take as chair. And 2 is going to be renegotiating a permanent intergovernmental agreement with the city on how the joint office is run. So those 2 things, that's where the collaborative leadership I have. Now, I would work with anybody at the city. I would work with anyone to get it done.
But who do you think is the most effective person in Portland City Hall?
I don't know. I would have to think about that. I've enjoyed working with all of the people there in different ways.
I'm giving you the opportunity to compliment somebody. Who's good?
I love working with Carmen Rubio on a lot of different environmental and climate work. She's been great in terms of like the parks work and working with especially East Portland Park. So I really enjoy working with Commissioner Rubio.
Okay.
I would say Commissioner Dan Ryan, because he has been the Portland Housing Bureau Director. He was the one person that came on when we were both serving on the Home for Everyone Executive Committee, and I'd been just crying out on that committee, sort of a lone voice. He came in and he understood the need for data-driven analyses. He was one who joined with me to say, things aren't working. What are we doing? And together we were able to get Built for Zero approved. And Safe Rest Villages, tiny part of a much bigger issue.
but he
It's
understands.
tiny, but it's, you know, it's also extremely pricey.
It's extremely pricey, as are motels. Those should not be the central focal point of our efforts. That's why we need to be thinking about it rationally and looking at our resources and saying, how much money do we have? What are our options, and how do we invest that money wisely, which has not been done. But back to your point about Commissioner Ryan and this joint office agreement, so he and I have had conversations about this very thing. The joint office is not a real joint office. It is a county department. The head of the joint office is hired, overseen, fired by the county chair exclusively, and there's like some dotted line connection where the city gives a bunch of money to the county, but doesn't have authority over what the joint office does, and doesn't have authority over the director. And so to some extent the chair can let the let Dan Ryan be part of that, but it's at the will of the chair. We do need to renegotiate that contract. I am already talking to Dan and to others at the city about how we can make this, including Joanne Hardesty and others, about this being an actual joint office meeting the intention to what it was originally supposed to be.
But I'm surprised though, because you're running for county chair. It's a little counterintuitive that you would want to give up the county's power over that office to a different and frankly incompetent.
So the thing
government
is,
agency.
I think that what the part of these problems are these two different jurisdictions across the river just clinging on to whatever power they have to the detriment of our community. And we need people who actually can work together, who have ideas and solutions to say, how can we do this in a smarter way, and not just say, pointing fingers for blame or clinging to our resources in a way that's unhealthy for our community. And I think that's exactly the problem. That's why we need a joint office that lives up to the intention of being truly collaborative, where we have honest dialogue and come to solutions, because we both have parts of this pie.
So 2 quick things. One, I forgot how much I enjoy working with Commissioner Hardesty on transportation issues, and she has been like a true ally and sister in arms as we've been working on big transportation stuff. So that have been great, and we've been really effective in the things we've worked on. And then the second thing, I think when we talk about this joint office, it is a joint office, that we need to recognize that the city is putting resources and investments into it, but also because of the supportive housing services measure, the amount of dollars that are coming through the county really eclipses what the city is doing at this point, and that has to be a factor in terms of who has responsibility for the director, the staff, the employees, and just overseeing the number of dollars. So it's going to be a big lift, but it needs to be more functional. And again, this is where communication is going to be really important between making sure that information is getting shared with everybody, because I know, as somebody at the county, you don't always hear, even as somebody on the board, you don't always hear what's happening in these different areas. And I'm sure I know that there are people on city council who feel like they have no idea what is happening with that. And that's just a matter of transparency and communication and openness, which
I've had those relationships all over with housing and homelessness.
So, sorry, if we could move on. So
Yeah.
Measure 110, we've now had it long enough to realize what the effects are. If you could go back and vote now, knowing what we know now, would you vote for it still, JVP?
I think I would even go further back in time to when it was actually being put together. And
It's going to be yes or no based on what we've got now.
So I would vote yes for it still. I think the biggest issue, and the reason I said I would go back to when it was being proposed, is the idea of having the money coming out so much later when the decriminalization actually happened. That timing was completely off, and we needed to really better align those so that the resources would be ready to go out into the community at the time when.
But if you couldn't change anything.
Yeah, no, I would,
still vote
because
yes.
we are where we are right now, but it is the law as it stands, and those resources are now out in the community, having having the potential to have an impact. So now we need OHA to get on board and make sure they're doing the correct oversight and staffing and shepherding of this as we're moving forward on this. But the fact that this was really put in place so that we could address the racial disparities that were happening in our criminal justice system because of the over-enforcement of drug criminalization, I mean, that is something that we had to stop.
Sharon?
No, I would not vote for it now.
Okay. I want to.
If you don't mind, since
Yeah.
we're doing the how are you going to
Sure.
vote. County charter review. I know that they're all separate proposals, but are there any of them that either of you are not going to vote for?
No. I mean, I'm going to vote for it.
You're going to vote for all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want
You
to
said-
ask you,
I thought-
you wrote
You
a letter.
testified against one.
You wrote a letter
Yeah.
proposing the auditor's request for a fraud hotline to be put in
No,
charter.
for
Ombudsperson.
For an ombudsperson.
Ombudsperson,
And I mean, like, I totally think we need an ombudsperson, but there are certain things that having them in the charter where the only way to actually change them is because through a vote of the people it makes it really cumbersome to be more nimble, and if you need to make updates or you need to change things. And that was really that was what my letter was in opposition.
What was the all funds budget this year? $3.3 billion.
Yeah, that was the all-up budget. The
So-
operating budget is
so-
like 2.8. Oh, no, I think we should. Oh.
Well, but how would it make you less nimble putting one person into, the auditor asked for it?
Yeah.
And-
No. I think we totally need to have an ombudsman. It's very, it's more prescriptive in terms of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and things like that. And I just think that's something that we could do in the ordinance. But I think we need it. I have hesitation about putting things in the charter that don't necessarily need to be there because it's hard to try to fix them. It's like we see that at the state with things that are in the Constitution that we're not, that legislators aren't able to change, that would require a vote. And that they've had unintentional consequences that we're dealing with right now, right? And I think that's the same thing that we're seeing with things that have been in the county charter too. So that's it. It's not that I'm opposed to that at all. It's having it in the charter, but I'll vote for it because we do need an ombudsman.
Any of them that you'll vote against?
No, I very strongly have supported the auditors, in particular those proposals, because it's about accountability, and it was actually very surprising that the chair and Commissioner Vega-Peterson testified against having those in charter, because it's almost a conflict of interest in my mind to have the board be directing what the ombudsperson can do, and we've had years and years and years to do it, and it has not gotten done. So at some point, call the question.
What about the city charter reform measure? Do you plan to vote for that, JVP?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
There are some issues that give me pause that at this point I would say no, but I have to continue to weigh that.
Okay. If we could touch on preschool for all, so enrollment numbers this year and also projected for next year are lower than what you guys had initially hoped for. And I know, you guys have said that you readjusted your goals, but a year and a half ago, the enrollment numbers, my understanding is that they were going to be higher.
No. So actually, if you look at the July 2020 report for Preschool for All and what we were estimating for the first year is between 500 and 1,000 seats. And so we have 687 children that are enrolled in 45 preschool programs across the county. So, and that was a number that was that was an estimate that we had been working on since the Preschool for All days pre-COVID, and the fact that we were able to reach that, even though we're down 300 childcare providers in Multnomah County, I think is a really big achievement. We, I think it's very doable to reach the priority populations in the first 7 years of the program, which is what we initially had. So about I think it's 5,000 to 7,000 children that in those priority populations. It's going to take a lot of work, and the impacts that we have on our child care system are still there. But I always think about where would we be in this situation right now if we didn't actually have the dollars for Preschool for All that are providing a stable public funding that are supports for the child care providers to help them keep their doors open, to have the workers have a living wage. This is a great base to grow on, especially considering the impact that COVID has had.
And so next year the goal is 1,100 kids total?
Yes.
Okay, and then ultimate goal in 10 years is 12,000?
Yes.
So when will we see it actually start to ramp up?
we've ramped up now. We're going to continue to ramp up over the next several years.
Right, but 1,100 next year, that's only
Yeah.
double 600.
I think that, this is the pilot year of the program. It's going to ramp up. It's kind of got the sloping curve. We're going to continue to have it ramp up over the next several years as we bring more providers into the program. We have the Pathways program that are helping providers that might not be ready for all of the pieces of Preschool for All. There is literally a very planful way that we have of growing this program over the years and bringing more people into the workforce through partnerships with our community colleges. We have more providers that are coming online, and we're going to be investing millions of dollars into the infrastructure to help expand capacity of our existing providers and help with build new childcare providers. We have to do all of those things.
So it sounds like 150 million came in from the first year of the tax, correct? And
Yes.
how much was used in this first year of launch?
So right now we have $52 million operating budget for Preschool for All. We've also set aside about approximately $100 million in both contingency and revenue smoothing, because we know, the county actually, we have a BIT, fund as well, because we know income tax is such a variable and volatile funding cycle. So we are setting aside dollars to help if there are outlying years where the expenses are going to be higher than what we're taking in, we're banking the money in the early years where our expenses aren't high to help make sure that we have the money to pay for the program in the long term.
So you said $50 million this year, 683 kids, so that's $73,000 a student.
Yeah, but it's not just going into the classroom seats. There's about $11 million that is going into, or $8 million that's going to facilities. There's money that's going in to help for coaching and professional development, not just of the teachers that are in the classroom, but the teachers that are also in the Pathways program and potential providers that want to come into the program. We have there's like $7 million administrative fee for the tax collection itself. So there's a lot of different pieces that go into that. And again, like I said, we set aside a lot of money to have contingency funds and to have to save for the outlying years when we may need to use those dollars.
Right, but that's not operating dollars.
Yeah.
It's already in reserve. So it still seems very expensive.
So for the actual seats themselves, for the providers, it's about $19 million for that. And then the other pieces of the money are going into a facilities fund, going into administration. There's dollars that are going into early childhood mental health therapists, like all of that. I can provide you the budget.
Right, I know, I've seen the budget presentation. I guess the question is, when we look at nonprofits or we look at service providers, the question is what percentage of the actual dollar goes into direct service provision? And you're saying a lot of that money is not going into direct service provision. So I thought, when this was on the ballot, we were talking about serving children in the classroom. Now you've got all these other things that you're telling us you're paying for.
All of these things are part of building the system. Sophie asked, how are you going to build the system? We are building the system by making these investments today in this budget cycle and the next budget cycle that are actually going to allow us to expand the capacity to build that larger system we need to get to universal. If we aren't making those investments right now, if we aren't making the facilities investments, if we aren't making the coaching and professional development investments, we are never going to be able to get there. So we have to make these investments in the early years to get to providing all the service for the children and the families in the long term.
So in 10 years, if we have 12,000 kids, is $115 million per year going to be able to support all 12,000 of those kids?
So the revenue is expected to grow over time, just like the economy will
So
bring
the
the income
revenue,
tax.
if it grows, would you expect it's able to support 12,000 kids?
So the revenue should be able to. One of the things that was built into the Preschool for All is that in 2026 we'll consider if there needs to be an adjustment to the taxes, and that was something that was voted on, and that was something that that was how it was worded. Then we sent to the board. So we're going to see how things are going, how many dollars that we have, what have we learned about the experience of those tax dollars and what the reality of the collection has actually looked like, and then the board in 2026 will get a report on and make a decision if we need to adjust the tax rate at all.
And could you adjust it without voter approval?
Yes, we have the authority to do that.
Okay.
So one last question. I know we've kind of knocked this around a little bit,
yeah.
but there is already a large nonprofit. There's Head Start, and there are various other providers of preschool education. The state has made a large investment in preschool education. Public schools and other school districts are already in the education business. why did the county, which already has a huge portfolio of responsibilities that are very challenging, why was it necessary for the county to get into this business?
Yeah, so as I said before, Preschool for All is a national model of how you can really implement the quality preschool experience for children and families. And part of the reason is that, one, there are components of it like a living wage for workers, which is higher than what we're seeing for Head Start or even state programs. The fact that it is universal, so that there aren't like certain dollar requirements that you have to, you can only earn so much to qualify for the program. This is really expansive. And the fact that we are doing it in a way that is it's a mixed delivery system. So you talk about, like, we already have schools. Yes, and I'm really proud to say we have 3 different school districts this year that are having preschool classrooms because of Preschool for All. So they absolutely are going to be a partner in this work. But so are licensed home-based providers who, when you look at how it's been implemented in jurisdictions that like started out by just bumping out their school system, they actually lost child care providers, especially home-based, smaller ones, and we lost infant and toddler seats, which we have a infant and toddler child care desert in every county in this state, so we cannot do that. So this is something, we need to have more federal investment in child care and quality preschool. We have to have the state be successful with the work that we're doing, because all of that is a part of the system, but Preschool for All itself was necessary because what we currently have weren't serving the families, especially those families who had the hardest time accessing preschool, like, black and brown children from single parents, children whose families are experiencing homelessness, low incomes, children with developmental delays and disabilities. That is how we built this program, to make sure that those children were going to be served in the right way, and that's why it's different, and that's why it was needed, and that's why it was overwhelmingly supported by Multnomah County voters to bring it here.
Where is one place you think the county is wasting money? And this is a question for both of you, and if you could be granular about that.
So that's a really good question. So I think that there are that we have to look at our public safety investments and how we're actually spending dollars, not just in like the sheriff and district attorney's office, but what we're doing in the Department of Community Justice, the way that we're investing in some of our nonprofit partners, and making sure that we are not doubling work and investments that's also happening at the city side, right?
Do you think that overlaps currently happening, and if so, can you give us a specific way that's happening?
Yeah, I think with the Office of Violence Prevention, they are investing in some of the same community organizations that the county is investing in, and that right now the conversations are happening to make sure that the outcomes that we're both looking for, the goals that we're asking them to reach, are actually being done in a way that's not like duplicating the investments. So I think that's a big thing. One of the ideas I have as chair would be collaborative budgeting within our community safety. So the health department, our Department of Community Justice, the DA's office, the sheriff's office, and really coming together to look at our public safety investments and budget dollars as a whole, to make sure everybody knows what the other is investing and working in, and how we're trying to get the overarching goals of really reinventing our justice system to do that. That is not work that the current chair has done, and it's something that I think is very needed, and that will, and the other piece of that is then making sure that the city is brought in for the areas that they're working in to be a part of that conversation.
What organizations are getting doubled up on?
I don't know right now. I just know that we're like, there's a lot of investment that's happening because this is such a critical issue, and I think we need to have the accountability and the transparency to make sure like what those investments
do you
are
know
going
if
for.
Overlap is happening, or is that just a guess?
I know that we are both funding organizations, but I don't know, but we don't really have the clarity right now to know exactly what programs the city is investing in, what those outcomes are supposed to be compared to the investments that the county is making.
So do you know if there's overlap with certain organizations who are getting funding from city or county?
There are many organizations, not just in public safety, that get funding from both the city and the county.
But you think the public safety one is a place where the county might be wasting dollars? I
think so. Yeah, I think it's because or doubling up on dollars that are coming through the city as well.
Sharon, what's one place you think the county is wasting dollars?
I would say the question is difficult to answer because we don't have that oversight and accountability at the county. We don't have a centralized way to identify if we're getting what we pay for. And in addition to just not being able to account for dollars, I would say we are not using the dollars we do get in the most effective ways possible. I've said that about our mental health system for ages, and as I've been a student of the county over the past 5 years, I just see my concern growing. And so I feel we have tons of money right now. I feel that we are likely not using it effectively in the Joint Office of Homeless Services in how we address homelessness. I am quite certain we're not using it effectively in behavioral health, so mental health and addictions.
And again, can you give us something specific where you are pretty sure dollars are getting wasted?
Well, I guess I would look at the most recent reporting on the supportive housing services measure and what we're getting for our money. And so it's $100 million-ish from the supportive housing services measure in Multnomah County. And we said we invested in housing for about 1,200 people.
Do you not believe, like, what's your, I mean, it seems like you're suspicious that something went on, or, I mean, what, can you be more blunt about it?
Yeah, I don't believe that we have actual data and knowledge and answers to those questions of where's the money going? What are the outcomes we are expecting to get from our community-based organizations that we are contracting with? We say things like, in our budget, we say, build capacity. We don't say things like, we expect to house XYZ or do other things. And so that information either isn't there, I have asked for it time and again, and I don't know which is worse. It just doesn't, or they're holding it back from me.
So if the Joint Office says we house 1,200 people using this money, and you say, can you show me where? If they don't produce that, are you saying they're lying about housing people?
I think that it is a lack of ability to. I think that it is likely more not being competent in being able to figure out how to put data out there effectively, how to measure data, how to determine what we need to measure, and how to share that with the public.
Should somebody have been fired for the overbilling of $500,000 on
That's an example. I mean, we should have, with an accountability system, we should have caught that. It shouldn't have relied on a whistleblower, but
All Good Northwest? Sorry, I should have finished the question. But
sorry, I didn't mean to.
You didn't do anything wrong. I just feel like I ought to, for the sake of our viewers at home, I ought to explain the question. The county was overbilled by $500,000 by All Good Northwest, one of its camp contractors, village contractors, whatever we're calling it these days. And I'm just wondering, why wasn't anyone fired for that? Do you think they should have been?
I think that there should have been a deep investigation into that to find what the source of the issue was. And my suspicion is it's our systems at the county that allowed that to happen. And then who's responsible ultimately for that? And so, depending what yes, it should be investigated. It should be investigated why we, had 400 and however many vouchers for housing, and we put out 16, or what. We need to be looking at all of these things, and I don't know why we aren't.
Commissioner Peterson, same question.
Yeah, I mean, so it absolutely should be investigated, and you can't say if you should or shouldn't fire somebody if there hasn't been an investigation. But the fact that the way that those dollars were being given to that organization is something that we have to talk about as the county, in terms of, are we going to be providing operational expenses for smaller organizations that we're asking to get into this business of doing this work, whether it's homeless services, whether it's community work for gun violence intervention, and actually helping support them in a way that the county hasn't been for. I think we're currently operating in a way that yes, we are going to help fund these organizations, but if we are doing that, there has to be a lot more accountability. There has to be a lot more information that is shared between the county and those organizations, and between the organizations and the county, in terms of where exactly those dollars are being used. It was absolutely unacceptable, but there was $500,000 that was overbilled, and that is something that, again, we need to have better systems in place, better tracking systems, better overall organizational support for the Joint Office and all of its many providers to make sure that things like that aren't going to be happening.
I have one more question, and then if anyone else does. But we don't have a sobering center. It's been shut down for 2 years. For 2 years, the city and county have been talking and meeting about having a new sobering center. Why is that taking so long, and who's at fault for us not having a sobering center right now?
You know, I think the fact that there's been dollars invested in this budget to have the county come in and really take charge of that process is a really good sign for our ability to actually, you know, bring this into being. I know that Commissioner Myron has been a part of the work that was doing for 2 years, where hundreds of thousands of dollars got spent on a plan and nothing actually got done. So I think part of the reason that the county is now stepping in is because there wasn't a lot happening, even though there was this critical need for a sobering center that was appropriate for people who were coming down off of meth. Now, you know, this is something that needs to be a priority. I'm very supportive of it, and I'm glad that it's under the county's jurisdiction.
What's the money in the budget for it?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
$300,000.
Yeah, I was going to say
what is it for? Is it for construction? Is it for more meeting? What is it for exactly?
For more meetings.
Okay.
It's to actually, you know, it's get to the point where it is now to actually being, you know, ready to be opened and find out where we're going to be able to put it and where, you know, who's going to run. It's more for planning, but it's also to do it with a very specific direction, similar to how the county did the work in planning and then looking at opening the doors to the Downtown Behavioral Health Resource Center.
So it's for planning, not building or contractor or anything like that. Okay. Sharon, who do you think is to blame for that?
So I actually, it's both the city and the county, but I would place more blame in the county's court. So this is something I came to the county, I talked about my work as an emergency physician addressing addictions issues and our addiction crisis in this county, saying we need to be doing something about meth. I get to the county and find the sobering center is in the bailiwick of the city. And I was like, why is that at the city? We're the local mental health authority. It's like, no, it's great. Leave it with the city because then they have to pay for it. And it's public safety, and police can drop people off. And we would send people to the ER, from the ER to the sobering center. It doesn't make sense in the world we're living in with meth now. So we needed something bigger and broader to address the needs of people who are in crises from whatever, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. And for that, it needs a strong clinical oversight, medical crisis oversight management. So I have partnered with Judge Nan Waller from the get-go and working at the state level to say, what is it we can do to have a triage and stabilization center for meth, for fentanyl, whatever it is.
Sorry, is this separate from the sobering center that the city and county have been talking about, or is this the same?
What happened was, we've been talking about the need, and then the city is saying we need to redo a sobering center, so came together to start this process of Beacon, the Behavioral Health Emergency Coordination Network. And from the beginning, I said, it was all city people at the table and me. And I said, you know what, this is so in the county's jurisdiction, we need to have county people. I brought in our health department director, our community justice, people from the county to be part of the process. And I asked the chair to be part of the process, and she said, no, we're doing Behavioral Health Resource Center, that's a city.
Sorry, I'm going to skip the process a little bit.
Yeah,
but
and
so when is it going to be open, and who's paying for it?
And so the thing is, it was moving along, and the chair said no. And then once there's collaboration like I've never seen before, the process really is important because it was moving along. And then the chair came in and said, a year and a half ago, she said, I want to take this, it looks like it will work. I'm going to take it over. And not only do I want to be involved as the county, I'm going to take it over. Suddenly everything went behind closed doors and stopped. That is where things stopped. Yes, the city spent too much money on something. Yes, there's been stuff the city and the county have done. The problem was when it became this political thing between the city and county chair's office and mayor's office. That's where the problem started, and it has continued, and finally, I think we're emerging from that, but I have been involved with the clinical leaders and the health systems leaders and the public safety leaders. We're all like, we know the thing we need. We know how to do it. We have the information, let's do it. We have the money even. And it was literally at that point where it became politicized.
But let's
Yeah.
like try to boil that down for a second.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the reason we don't have a meth sobering center in the city of Portland is because Deborah Kafori and Ted Wheeler can't get along?
I would say that it is because Deborah Kafori wanted to take over this process, and that became a political issue with the city. And that's when it's behind closed doors. I don't know. No, we're all kind of guessing. So there's like, oh, we need a memorandum of agreement. We need all of these things. No, it doesn't even make sense. And because I worked in the policy world and in the health systems world, straddled these different areas, I know what we need. We could get this done. We should have gotten this done ages ago with the county as a partner, and just convened and brought everyone together instead of, I'm going to take it over and our people are going to take it over. The 300,000 isn't even contributing to the infrastructure. It's for a county person to take over the process.
Commissioner, I get the impression you have a different view of how this happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect example of Sharon's ineffectiveness and really being able to get something accomplished. She has been working on this project for years. It was stalling out. There was nothing that was really being accomplished.
So ridiculous.
With it. There is no like concrete action that was coming after lots of discussion and planning and things like that. And there was a lot of frustration about how do we get it actually moving into a forward momentum on this. And that's when the county stepped in to take it over. I don't know that it was how political or personal that it was, but it was really about, let's actually take this into a place where we can get something going on it. It is going to, I mean, this is something that's very needed. We're also going to need some legislative changes to make sure that we can hold people enough for them to come down off of meth. But this is where things were stalling out and actually not getting done, and so we had to switch who was actually leading the work and making sure that we could bring it to fruition through the county's
So you
resources.
think it was ineffective until the chair stepped in versus Sharon, who thinks it was effective until the chair stepped in? There was like years of work where it was just planning and talking and nothing actually concrete. I remember having a meeting and nobody knew, what it was going to cost, really what it was going to look like.
How long ago did the chair step in?
It was put into this last budget, so I would just say in the last, to my knowledge, like in the last 6 months before the budget.
Way longer ago, about a year to year and a half.
Very different stories. All right, we'll do some reporting.
Can I just
Well,
actually...
and I said the last 6 months before the budget.
Can I just speak to, I just query, have you talked to anyone involved in the process and the history at all, aside from anyone from the county?
Yes.
About and what have they've said? Because I've spoken, I talk to all of the people that are involved all the time because I know them, and they're calling and telling me this is when things went awry. But what is it that people are, who is it that you're talking to?
So just people who were frustrated with the lack of momentum with this.
Okay,
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, we gotta finish with our one sort of fun question. If you die tomorrow?
No.
That's really fun.
Let me
Super
do
fun
Sorry, go ahead.
question.
Mr. Fun over here. We think a lot about our last
About death.
about our last meal.
Oh.
Especially as these interviews continue. So, if you had one food you could have before as your last food, what's the one food you'd pick? People said someone said corn on the cob, someone said ice cream. Like, what is the one thing you have to have on the menu?
Key lime pie.
Great.
Pizza?
What kind of pizza?
Like everything.
All right, Supreme.
Great. Okay, thank you
Very
both.
good.
Thank you
Thank you for
guys.
your time.